Hey everyone, my name is Bethany Hunt, and this is my project for InTask Standard Number 1. The first standard is titled Learner Development, and in this standard, the teacher must understand how learners grow and develop, recognize that patterns of learning and development vary within individuals and across the cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical areas. And the teacher must also design and implement developmentally appropriate and challenging learning experiences for students. I am a nurse. I'm currently working as a school nurse. I've never been a paraprofessional, and I've not ever been able to sub in a classroom due to my work schedule. So, unfortunately, I have very limited experience with being in the classroom other than my own experiences and then a few hours of observations that I completed for my associate's degree. So, my examples are based upon, like I mentioned, my experiences. I was able to visit briefly with our other building nurse regarding one example of a standard not being met. And I did reach out to a couple of our staff members here within the building via email, but unfortunately, I have not been able to speak with them personally or in person because we've been out for snow and ice, and they've not been able to respond to their emails in a timely manner. So, for examples of standard 1 not being met, the first thing I have is that the teacher understands how learning occurs, how learners construct knowledge, acquire skills, and develop disciplined thinking processes, and knows how to use instructional strategies that promote student learning. When I read this one, I immediately thought about one of the teachers I had in 8th grade. It was my math teacher. She acted like she just really didn't want to be there, honestly. She stood in the front of the classroom and spoke in a monotone, and she would only work one or two problems from each lesson on the board along with us to show us step by step what we should do. The rest of the time, she basically sat at the desk in the back of the room and told us if we had any questions that we could refer to the step-by-step problems in the front of the chapter. She actually also only gave us credit for problems if we worked them exactly the way she would step by step. It didn't matter if we came up with the correct answer by working it a little differently. We would only get credit if we did it exactly how she would. This is the first time that I can recall really struggling with the class because I had always been a good student and done well and made honor roll, but I found that sometimes I worked math problems a little differently than others might, and although I can usually come up with the correct answer, she would not give me credit. And that's the first time I almost failed a class, and it was devastating to me. Since then, I've had a lot of anxiety regarding the math classes I've taken since that time. Luckily, all of my instructors have been wonderful, approachable, and very helpful. The second example I have is the teacher creates developmentally appropriate instructions that takes into account individual learners' strengths, interests, and needs, and that enables each learner to advance their learning. This is also an example of from when I was in high school. I had a history teacher that would only sit in the front of the class behind a podium and lecture the entire hour. We had to take notes in a notebook that was designated for that class, and periodically he would walk around and make sure that we all had our notes and kept up with them. This was the only method of instruction. There were no worksheets, no study guides, or anything to help us prepare for tests. We only had our individual notes that we had taken throughout the lecture. He covered such a great amount of information in that hour time every day that his lectures and lessons were never very clear, and he never took into account that students learn differently. We have different strengths and interests and needs that enable us to enhance our learning or advance our learning. So a lot of us didn't do very well because we weren't taught in a way that we could understand. He didn't take into account that not all of us learn just by listening. And the third example I have is the teacher understands the role of language and culture in learning and knows how to modify instruction to make language comprehensible and instruction relevant, accessible, and challenging. I live in an area that lacks diversity. There's very little to no diversity in my hometown, and then I work about an hour away from home, and still there's very little diversity. We do occasionally have children from foreign countries and different cultures move into our district, but unfortunately they usually don't stay very long. I'm assuming probably because there is little diversity and they have troubles finding church congregations and groups that are like-minded. So they do usually move out of the area and into somewhere with a little more diversity. And I think that because we don't really have any diversity in our area, our teachers fail to modify instruction to make the language comprehensible and instruction relevant and culturally responsive to these kids. Teachers have a lot on their plates already, and if they're not dealing with diversity on a day-to-day basis, I think it's easy for them to forget that they should modify the instruction to make it culturally relevant. And when these students don't stay very long, and that's a habit that we continue to see, I feel like they probably don't want to spend any extra time modifying their instruction. And this is something that I did discuss with the building nurse. She is a longtime employee of the district as well as a graduate of this school, and she also said that when she was in school, she cannot recall any time that the instruction was relevant to any cultures or backgrounds other than her own. And then for examples of standard 1 being met, I have that the teacher actively seeks out information about learner interests in order to engage learners in developmentally appropriate learning experiences. For this one, I was lucky enough to be in a math class with a teacher that did almost anything she could think of in her power to make learning relevant and to help her students engage better. This teacher was working with her students on word problems because they were really struggling with identifying what the problem was and how to set up equations. So she went around the room, it was a small class, and she asked each one about their interests in order to engage them in the question itself. So whatever it was, whether it was baseball, basketball, reading, crafting, she helped them change the word problem to incorporate their interest so that they could engage better, had better motivation, and apply it to their real life circumstances. And they seemed to really do well when she did this. And the next example I have is a teacher seeks and uses in-school and out-of-school resources to support and accelerate each student's learning and development. This was a 4th grade English teacher that I witnessed using curriculum that he purchased that was not part of the current curriculum in the school to bring in because he had taught with it before at a different school, and he really thought that students did well with it. He went above and beyond, met with the principal, met with the superintendent and the school board to get permission to use these books that he really liked, and then brought them in on his own, out of his own pocket. And finally, the teacher collaborates with families, communities, colleagues, and other professionals to promote learner growth and development. The teachers here are really great to collaborate with the nurses when they feel like there might be a medical issue causing students to have difficulties in the classroom, whether it's problems with attention and they're questioning whether these children take medications to treat ADHD, or if we believe that maybe they have vision or hearing troubles. And when we have teachers questioning eye or ear health, they will bring them into the nurse's office, and we can do a quick little hearing and vision test just to ensure that that's not a problem. And in our building, our teachers teach in a pod, which is just a group of grade level teachers, and they also co-teach. So our co-teachers split the day half and half with each other, and they meet once a week to ensure that they're discussing students that are having a little bit of an issue to see if they're having problems with the subjects that the other teacher teaches, if they are having problems sitting still, learning, whatever it may be, just to see if they're both seeing the same thing in both classrooms. And then they also collaborate grade level with their pod teachers so that they can ensure that like the science teachers are all teaching basically the same thing around the same time. And they also are quick to communicate with families, to ask for any input, and other professionals in the building, such as our administrator, to promote learner growth and development.